Welcome everyone to NEWHD NYC with your host Ray K, available on all major podcast platforms and powered by NEWHD Media. Now here's your host, Ray K.
We're rolling now. Let's Kevin Kernan's my guest, and we're talking sports. We're going to talk about Ball 9, which is, I think it's a new platform. And Kevin just had an article out this morning, which I was reading right off the bat. It's pretty colorful, website. Kevin, tell us about just the sports writer's life during this pandemic. Like how has things changed from your perspective?
Well, for me, it changed dramatically when my position at the New York Post was terminated. So, that happened in May, or first day of May. So, just from that situation, obviously, papers, cutting back. But the big thing that's changed is, I'm a people person, and, I still deal with people, and I still have plenty of contacts. So in some ways, I'm more valuable now because I can reach people. I got their numbers. Matter of fact, I won't say who, but a writer just called me to ask for a number of a prominent Met. So I have those contacts still. But for the writers themselves, the big change, Ray, has been that we're now just like this. Everything is Zoomed or Skyped or whatever. And in some ways, it's good. Because you can still have access, but you don't have the individual access, and it's very hard to ask follow-up questions. And you're lucky if you get a question. The other day in the Steve Cohen press conference, Sandy Alderson press conference, the Mets, you raise your hand like you're back in school. You know how it goes. You hit the button, you raise your hand. Luckily, I got called on, and I always ask good questions. And actually, Mets fans are very. I heard a lot on Twitter, and you can follow me at AMBS_Kernan. My name is Kevin Kernan. Obviously, you can look for that too. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. But the Mets fans are very happy because we were already 45 minutes, close to 40 minutes into that press conference, and everything's been asked. And I thought Cohen came out really good.
Kim, was it a Zoom press conference or you were actually there?
No, it was a Zoom press conference. There's
Okay.
no real press conferences anymore.
Okay.
And so you have 100 reporters on that thing. And, again, because of my reputation, I was able to ask a question. And because you got to take care of the beat writers, the columnists,
So Cohen knew you when you put your hand up. He goes, "Oh, I know Kevin."
No, he didn't know me. The moderator for the Mets knew me.
Okay.
But Cohen knows me because, he's a Mets guy and he's been reading them.
Just trying to get the inside scoop on how people get picked. It's
Well, first of all, just so the inside scoop real quick is the beat writers get first. All the major beat writers, they get picked first, and then maybe TV, then maybe columnist, and I fit in that category, columnist. So everything is done by Zoom. But I asked them about I wanted to ask something different, not the same old stuff. And I asked him, I said, because he's a big Mets fan, and that's what's different here. And if you read my column today, I have it up here at Ball 9, easy to get to ball9.com. And but you can get on any device. And I wrote a column about what Mets fans really want and what they've been dying to have forever. And I list all those things. But I asked him, as a Mets fan, what was your reaction to the trade of Jared Kelenic? When he gave away the number 6 pick of the 2018 draft in the trade for the Mariners. And he gave a great answer without slamming Brodie Van Wagenen, but he made it clear that the Mets are going to build through the draft and be a team that can sign free agents, but also can build, grow their own. And he compared it to Point72, his asset management company. He said if he would just go out and get talent for that company, he'd go broke. And when you're making $14 billion, that's an amazing comment. So you have to grow your own, like anything, any business. And again, that's the beauty of my job. I always love my job because I can always talk to interesting people, and it could be, a $14 billion hedge fund guy one day, or it could be an usher who fought in World War II, with Patton, crossed the Rhine who's a usher at Mets. So it could be anything. So he said basically he's going to run it like he runs Point 72, where he's going to acquire talent, but also develop his own talent. And that's always been a sticking point with the Mets fans. You can't give up your young talent. And Brodie Van Wagenen, the biggest mistake he made when he came in was it's the oldest trick in the book. I'm sure all the other GMs called him, but he fell for it. He went for his clients, who used to be his clients, Cano, and then, of course, the reliever Diaz. But you always try to get the new GM to give up talent he really doesn't know. And since he just got aboard, he knew nothing about Kalanick. And that's a trade that will probably haunt the Mets forever. But it was just to answer your question, it's just an interesting angle to take instead of the same old questions which you hear every time you hear from the media, pretty much.
Well, I'm a Yankee fan, and I always have we always have, it's like a rivalry between Yankee fans and Mets fans.
Sure.
Most of my friends are Mets fans, it seems, and I got them because of the 27 World Series, so I always get them the dig, and it's an easy thing, and we joke about it. And the Mets are like, it's like a Mets thing. I say whenever these stupid things happen, I go, they're the Mets again. They lose a 10-run game, or it becomes a running joke.
So,
and they're all thrilled about this Cohen thing. I mean, it's like a change of their life.
Well, that's one of the things. That's why I wrote this column today, because it's what Mets fans want, and one of the points I list about 10 things that they want. Then I go into a lot of different stuff, including Bauer, and again using my empirical knowledge of baseball. Because just so you understand, right, I grew up in New Jersey. I went to, I grew up in Kenilworth. I went to Ramapo College. I played baseball through college. I was a good baseball player. And
so the game, obviously.
I know the game. That's my
right.
I'm not saying I'm a great baseball player, but at the time I did set records at both my high school and my college for hitting. So I know hitting. I covered Tony Gwynn for 10 years. We talked hitting every day for 10 years.
Wow.
I respect players because I understand that it's not an easy job. It's not an easy game. And hitting a baseball is by far the hardest thing. And I'll go by. All you got to do is watch Michael Jordan, the greatest athlete in my mind I've ever seen. He did a good job, but he wasn't a good baseball player. It's so hard to hit a baseball. So my point is I have more information to give the reader because I understand the game better. And I know the game inside out. And I'm not afraid to be curious and ask questions. And that was one of the things that impressed me about Cohen, too. He says he wants players who are curious and people in the front office who are curious, and you have to do that. With the Wilpons are the Wilpons, and now you can't throw that at your Mets friends anymore. I grew up a Yankees fan, so I know what you're saying. I'm much older than you probably. I remember the 1960 World Series. What that was like. 60 years ago when Mazeroski hit the home run. I was 7 years old and crying for days. Because that's the way it was, but. Here's the point I want to make about the Yankees real quick. Yes, you got those 27 World Series, but in the last 20 years, you got one, basically.
Yep, that's right.
2009, and the stat I always use that really pisses off Brian Cashman is that since 2003, the Yankees have won as many World Series as the Florida Marlins, or now the Miami Marlins. In 2003, the Marlins beat the Yankees. The Marlins and Yankees each have one World Series victories in that time. So the Yankees got, the Yankees have they've drinking the analytics Kool-Aid a little too much, and for all their talents, they haven't gotten where they need to be.
Right.
Now I think you're really going to see a real rivalry between the Mets and Yankees, and the first thing the Mets fans have to do is cleanse themselves of the Yankees. They don't want to be compared to the Yankees. The Yankees are their own entity, and Steve Cohen had a great comment about that. He said, the Yankees are one of 29 other teams. So in my mind, he slapped the Yankees right there, saying, well, this isn't like the old days where the Wilpons were always concerned with the Yankees were doing. And that was one of their flaws. And you can't be concerned about what the Yankees are doing. First of all, you're in the same city, but you're in different leagues. And I do think it's great to have a rivalry and be aware of what the Yankees are doing. And that's why if I were the Mets, I would go out tomorrow and sign Trevor Bauer and get it done and over with and move on. Because that gives you a 1 and a 1A ace situation with DeGrom and Bauer. You already brought back Stroman, and they can talk all they want about catching in center field. You still need the pitching. The only reason, the reason the Rays got there this year is because they had 3 really good starters. And don't believe all the BS about this being a bullpen game now. You still got to have the starters. So that's where the Mets are at. That's where the Yankees are at. We'll see what happens, but at least we got a real rivalry now.
Is this sort of like equivalent to when Steinbrenner came to the Yankees in '73 with Cohen now?
Very equivalent, and a little different in that Steinbrenner, I don't think he grew up a Yankees fan. This guy's hardcore Mets fan.
Okay.
And Steinbrenner, I think to me, the tip-off, and I write about it in the column, and not many people wrote this, or they used a quote, but some of it used it wrong. When they quoted Cohen, it was a very good question someone asked about, how long can you wait? How quickly do you want to win a World Series, basically, was the question. And he said, kind of like I want to win in 3 to 5 years. And he said, he didn't say we, he said, That's a Steinbrenner comment. And that to me shows more about, that one sentence shows more about Cohen. And that's a little bit what I wrote about today, because I write in depth. I just don't write the same old garbage.
Right.
And a lot of people, I noticed, I went through the clips, and some people changed that quote to we. Maybe they heard we, but he said I went back and listened to it again. And so he is got a little George Steinbrenner in him. And, he's got the money. He's got, I thought it was very interesting, too, how he included his wife in the situation. She's going to be running foundations and things like that. So it's, and he also said, somebody asked him, kind of like a hobby, because that's what you ask rich guys, hey, is this a nice hobby for you? And he said, no, this is work too. This is work, and that's how you got to look at it. So we'll see. I'm still not saying they're out of the woods, because Sandy Olson's got to make the right hires now. You got to make the right people. Having money doesn't just automatically make you a World Series champion, as you know from the last 20 years. So we'll see where it goes. But it sure gives you a fighting chance. And now, and here's the key, people respect the Mets in the business. The Mets have a chance now to be better because people want to work there. They're not scared off by Wilpons. So that's where we're at.
Wow. Okay. I want to go for another Subway series. That'll be exciting,
It would be fun.
Yeah. Kevin, you're a baseball guy. I always, I talk to some ex-players, and they don't seem to like the analytics, and they don't like the game now. What's your feeling on all that?
Well, actually, I created a term called, and it's #over-nerding. It used to be over-managing. Now it's over-nerding.
Right.
So that's what I feel about that, and in one word. And I usually wear the shirt for podcasts and things, but I didn't wear it today. It's a nice over-nerding shirt. You can buy shirts like that at Ball 9 too, because it's kind of, we're a little bit crazy over there. We're not afraid to call people out. We have no agenda, and we actually did a podcast this week, or they call it a roundhouse. But we had former players on, like Jeff Fry. We had like 4. Louis Tion even joined us. The great Louis Tion, and. They were all against analytics to the 10th degree. I mean, analytics can help you be a better player. It can do something. The high-speed video can show you things. You can pick up trends, sequences, but you still got to do it. And you still have to manage what you got a little bit. And for what and I like Kevin Cash, but the move that he made was the dumbest move I've seen in 44 years of covering sports. Not just baseball, sports. You do not take out a guy who's pitching a shutout and who's got the other team. You can tell the other team is all screwed up. Struck out the top 3 batters 6 times. The 3 guys, the 2 times he faced them. You could see Mookie Betts, after he got on base, when he went over to the first base coach to give him his protective gear, he was laughing, because I guarantee you he was saying, I can't believe they took out Snell.
Right.
So, and again, now people will defend that by saying that's how they got there all year. And that's what analytics does. It wants both sides of the street. It can never admit a mistake. And like one of my good managing friends, I won't say, because I'm in touch with a lot of baseball people, some still managing, some not, a lot of scouts. those type of people who know the game. But one of my good friends says all the time, he says, how come analytics departments never get fired? And that's the truth. You know, managers get fired, GMs get fired, analytics departments never get fired. So and analytics, let me make this clear too, Ray. This is another thing people don't understand. Analytics have always been there in games. I'll go back to Jack McKean as a manager I covered. Jack was a math whiz. When he wasn't doing baseball stuff, he was fooling around in the stock market. So he would always look at the numbers. All these guys looked at the numbers. The analytics have come up with a couple of new categories, but mainly it's a language now where they can speak amongst themselves if they don't understand the game. And that's the essence of analytics in my mind. Because analytics have always been there. We always cared about on-base percentage, for example. Always cared about that. But some of the dumb things being done now, and the pure stupidity of players not taking advantage of all that green. It's one of the things, going back to Tony Gwynn, what he told me is that, you know, when he gets in the batter's box, the first thing he looked for was green. Because when you're in the box, and as a hitter, I can relate to that, and being a lefty hitter, the first thing you look at, you know, before you get to the pitcher's release point is where they're playing me. Because you're not you're not that good where Tony Gwynn was, but you're not that good where you can control the hit, but it gives you something to shoot for. And the fact that they don't take advantage, analytics would be gone tomorrow if the hitters had the guts to take the advantage and take what the fielders are giving them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you saw in the World Series too, there was a runner on third base and Adames was up, I believe. And it was a key run in one of the earlier games, and they never got him home. It's where Margot tried to steal home. He had that whole second base side was wide open, and he's trying to yank everything. If you just try to put the ball over there, hit behind it, or even bunt, you score runs. Getting back to McKean again, his philosophy always was, if I score one run, you got to score two. And that's never more true than the postseason where you face good pitching. So analytics play a role, a minor role, but it still comes down to execution and gut feeling and seeing how the game is going. And one of my favorite lines I always use is, you got to manage the game. You got to manage what's in front of you. You can't manage the 4 o'clock meeting when you sit down with the analytic guys. You got to manage the game in front of you. Cash made a huge mistake. He basically, I think they would have won that game. And because you could tell, if you know baseball, you could tell Snell was on it. He had learned a lot. That's the other thing analytics don't do. They don't give players credit for getting better as the season goes on. They just go by the history of everything. But Snell, that day, Snell was a different pitcher than he was any time earlier this year, and certainly any time in the postseason. And that's the problem with that. I'm not totally anti-analytics, but I'm anti-analytics running the show. So that's where I'm at with that.
Do you think this will change things in the analytic field?
I think it has changed things already.
Okay.
You know, like him or not, Tony Luce, who was an analytic guy, was rehired at 76 years old. Dusty Baker did a good job with the Astros as a 71-year-old manager. And these guys are the guys that, you know, they manage a little bit by what they see in the field. It's like getting back to McKean again. When he won Game 6 against the Yankees in 2003, everybody in that front office, all the analytic guys or whoever, assistants, and there weren't as many back then, of course, but they all said, don't start Josh Beckett on short rest, save him for Game 7. But at least they let him make that decision. And he said, no, I'm starting him. I don't want to get to a Game 7. Anything can happen in a Game 7. I talked to Beckett. He's ready to go. You know, he's fired up about this. We're going to do it. And of course, after they won that game, all the analytics guys and all the other guys in the front office came back and said, hey, we were with you all the way, Jack. Great job, you know. And that's the world of analytics. In some ways, it mimics some of the things going on, I think, in the world today, where you got to shake your head at some of the decisions made by certain people and the world we live in.
Right. I got more baseball stuff. I want to segue into ball 9. I mean, this is exciting. I love the site. I mean, it's colorful. It has that edge to it. Tell us how this started and how you got involved with it, Kevin.
Well, I only got involved with it because my job was terminated.
Okay. All right.
It's one of those things.
So one door closes, one door opens.
Exactly.
Deal. All right.
Exactly. And And again, it's not the same, I worked 44 years in mainstream media. You know, I started in a little paper in New Jersey, the Hudson Dispatch, went over to the Patterson News. We were co-owners. Then because I worked in New York, and again, I was one of the lucky ones. When I came out of college, I went right to assistant sports editor. So I never covered a prep sport in my life. Well, not that prep sports are bad. I love prep sports, but I'm just talking about I moved right to the New York Football Giants the day after I started. I've always I've had all the major sports, and then from getting to know people, I got hired by the New York Post first time around in 87, 88. I left, went to San Diego for 10 years. Who wouldn't want to go to San Diego? And I always make a joke. I'm the only idiot who moved from San Diego back to New Jersey, so.
Yeah, usually once you get out there, you stay there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like it's perfect weather, living in air conditioning. And of course, I was also smart enough to sell my house in a downturn where the house quadrupled after I sold it. So that's, but I got back, it was a great place to live, lived in Pequannock, New Jersey, and raised a family there, my family there as well, 3 kids and my wife, and then worked for the Post for 23 years. And then one day my phone rang after after the change was made, and Chris Vitale, the founder, called me and told me some of his ideas, and I said, yeah, it's not the same thing, obviously, as working for what I did for 23 straight years before that, or 44 years over that. But in some ways, it's very interesting because, like you said, it's an interesting site. We do things differently. We're not afraid to kind of break boundaries. And even this column I wrote today, a normal column at the Post is about 650, 700 words. Well, this was 2,500 words, so I could really, I still approach it like it's 650 words, so I'm not fluffing it up. I'm just getting more into depth and stuff. And
well, it's so good. You want to keep it going. I was happy to see as I was going on my phone. I'm like, well, this is great, and there's more to go.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
that's when you really hit the sweet spot as a writer, because I know if I'm trying to fill it out, I can feel it myself. So, but I made the points I made, and then they all transition because everything is connected. Because we can talk about what he wants to do with the team, but then you got to talk about Bauer, and it allows me things to, like with Sandy. I pointed out, like he's an ex-Marine, First Division Marines, and he went on a strike for Bauer. Like he had an assault there. He made a comment like, we want personalities like that. In the past, you never would have heard that. And I recently did a piece on Mickey Mantle's home, and if you're a Yankee fan, there's a lot of good Yankee stuff in there as well. So it's not. Believe me, it's not just the Mets, Yankees, or whatever. I try to mix it up. But I found out Mickey Mantle's home was being sold. His original home in Oklahoma, and where he was grew up from the age of 2 to 12 roughly. And I tracked down they were auctioning the home off, and I tracked down the owner, the guy who had it for the last 25 years with his partner. And there's just amazing stories out of that home. The garage, the detached garage, is where Mickey learned to hit, where his grandfather and his father would pitch to him. And it was a tin, if you ever watched, American Pickers, it's one of those garages that are falling apart, But Mickey would hit right there. And the owner of the house told me about some of Mickey Mantle's friends, because he lives in the area. So he would tell me stories that he found out about the house where Mickey Mantle's friends would come by at the same age and say Mickey was like a 10 or 11, and they're just normal neighborhood friends, and they want to clown around a little bit. And Mickey's dad would come home every day at 4:00, Mutt, and he would pitch to Mickey, and the kids would come by and they'd shag balls over the house and everything like that. But sooner or later, they became kids and started goofing around. So Mutt, Mickey's dad, would turn to him and said, "You boys run along now, because Mickey and I got some work to do." So it gives you insight. Even here we are, 60, so many years later, decades later, I'm still finding out new information about things. And you can't do that in a short, you need 2,000 words for something like that. And that's also just the right amount in some ways, because you don't want to go much further than that. But like you said, you want to scroll. If you're making the commitment, make sure it goes all the way. And that's what we try to do at Ball 9. We also have different things. The pandemic has changed things a little bit because we have a food column where we were going to go to different ballparks and evaluate food. But we're still evaluating, but now it's more like a hot dog and that type of food things because ballparks aren't open. But also, even me, I went to Savannah in early September when nobody's going to games. I went to a game in Savannah with the Savannah Bananas, 2,000 fans, had a great time, lived through it, even though major league ballparks weren't open, and wrote about this special team and some of the things that they're doing are totally against the grain, but they're sold out every night, although they cut it in half this year because of the pandemic. So I wrote about that as well. So and once we can travel again, there'll be even more interesting things. So it's an interesting site, and I would recommend everybody go there.
Well, that's cool stuff because I always, me and my friend, we walk New York, we see where Babe Ruth lived. You went to Liverpool to see the Beatles' houses, and you get just more insight when you actually see the stuff.
Absolutely, and Babe Ruth, I did a piece about a month and a half ago about the problems that the Babe Ruth Museum is having in Baltimore because they can't get people in the door, and now they're starting to open up a little bit, so it's a little different. But amazing stories from Babe Ruth that I didn't even know at the time. And again, I visit all these places. I always AMBS, which is it's kind of an ironic nickname, but it stands for America's Most Beloved Sports Writer. That's why I call myself AMBS Kernan _.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nickname not given to me by myself. I'm not that. I don't have that big of an ego. Somebody, I was in Fenway Park, another writer. I took a picture, a selfie, and it was the year of Fenway Park was the America's Most Beloved Ballpark. So that's how this all came about. The other writer looked at the picture and said, America's Most Beloved Sports Writer in America's Most Beloved Ballpark.
Okay.
But I'm also beloved because I crush you if you need to be crushed. So I'm not this hearts and flowers guy. So, it's like Brody Van Wagenen told me when in spring training, because in spring training I try to let the players, I'm a little bit more optimistic in spring training, like any fan would be. And so Brody,
everyone's in first place, right, when that season starts.
I remember Brody said, "Why can't we have this version of Kernan instead of the other version of Kernan once the season starts and you start losing games?" Because a quick story, insight into my job. When the Mets were struggling a couple years ago, 2019, it was the second half. Brody hadn't talked for like weeks. I went with the team to Miami, and Brody finally gave a press conference. I listened to the first 12 questions that were being asked, and then finally I asked a question that was pertinent. And the key to asking questions, too, is not to ask too long-winded questions, not to ask questions where you give a guy this or that. You ask the question and let them answer it, all right? So I said to Brody, Brody, and at the time the Mets were terrible. Brody, I said, is this on you? And he gave me an answer where he basically said, no, we do everything as an organization, blah, blah, blah. But I'm a buck stops here guy. So I wrote the column the next day, and it was not nice to Brody. And so the next day, Brody came up to me in the press box and said, hey, you got a minute? Can we talk? I said, sure. And we actually talked for 40 minutes. But he said, Kevin, I got to ask you, why did you write the column you wrote? And I looked at him and I said, Brody, I didn't write that column. You wrote the column. I gave you the opportunity to answer the question. This is what you said, and I just went off of that. So if you had said Harry Truman type comment, like this is on me, we need to fix this, that would have been the column. You kind of evaded responsibility, and that became the column. And like I said, we talked for 40 minutes. So that's just a little insight into how my job is done.
Were you was Mickey your hero? I imagine he very well could have been.
Okay. Yeah, I was from that era where he was, and I write about that too in the column because that's some of the things too. I can bring into, personal things like how it always was. When you got your Mickey Mantle cards, you saved them, and I saved all mine. And I had older brothers, so I had an unbelievable collection until I went away to college, of course. And my father threw them away, not my mother. But Mickey was the card you saved. Jerry Lumpy was the card you put in your bicycle spokes. So yeah,
he was the guy you had like 20 of them, right? For some reason, the bad guys you had more.
Yeah.
Not bad guys, but yeah.
But I had a lot of good Mickey cards because I used to like I don't know if you're from that era, but we flipped cards. We kind of did things to get.
Well, 68 was when things started to come in, with me, So
Yeah,
I
I
was
was
at
a bit earlier.
68,
I
so
was
like,
probably from 60 on, even some
uh-huh.
50s, late 50s, but probably 7 years old, really starting to get into. And we had a corner store at the end of my street, so every time you got a nickel, you could go down there and buy them. And so that's yeah. Mickey was, and that's what I write about. I mean, I don't want to give the column away, but I would recommend you to read that one. It's easy to
Hmm.
find on the site,
Hmm.
and anyone who's
Okay.
a Mickey fan will appreciate the column.
Did you meet Mickey? Or I know it's in the
Yeah, I
column
met Mickey
probably.
through the years. I
Okay.
met Mickey through and I also was, as a fan, I was there at Mickey Mantle Day and things like that, or different events. But then, of course, by the time I started covering in '77, he was long retired. But I did, I met him at different events back then, Old Timers Day. I remember there was a press conference for something he was endorsing, and he was on the dais. So yeah, Mickey, and the key is too, like Roger Maris, for example. I always appreciated Maris too, and as time went on, I was I got to know the Maris family really well, and I was there, and that's the funny thing about my job, and that's why I always appreciate the opportunities I had when I wrote for Post and things. I would go to major events all the time. I mean, I was there when McGuire broke Maris's record. I was with Maris's family at breakfast that day.
Okay. Okay.
So, and I remember when McGuire holding up the Maris bat that they presented him with, holding up to his chest, saying, "This, Roger's part of me now." So, and then of course they had their falling out. That's another story. But through the years, I got to meet all those, if not the player themselves, the family of the players. The two. I think there's two surviving Mantle sons now, things like that. And there's some really, and then you find out I kind of complete the story when I write a column.
I got to ask you this, Kevin, since we're bouncing, you were bouncing around. I'm bouncing around. Steroids. You think they should, Barry Bonds, these guys, should they be in the Hall of Fame?
That's a tough one. And I've been an anti-steroid guy. I've been on the wall, and I don't vote for those guys, and I know them well. I mean,
Do you vote for the Hall of Fame? Are you one of the
oh yeah,
writers that vote? Okay.
I've been voting for the Hall of Fame for quite a while, probably since '98 or so, and I know Barry well. I don't want to bore you, but I got a million Barry stories, and I got, I know Clemens well. I went and visited his family, very close to his sisters. It's just something, and again, you got to understand, I have three children who also all played in college sports. My daughter was a softball player, but so not only did I see steroids as a professional in the game, I saw steroids also as a what it did in amateur sports and in high schools and in colleges. I mean, I go to my son's, I go to my son's game, and then the next year or the next spring you come back, and some kids are 40 pounds heavier. How the heck did that happen? And things like that happen. So I've been anti-steroids, but at the same time, with all the crap that baseball is shoving down our throat now, I'm wondering, do we, why can't these guys be in the Hall of Fame with just a note that they took steroids? And so I'm kind of torn. There's so many writers now who are willing to look the other way, and I'm not like that. I'm with the Tom Verducci, I would say, clan. And it still bothers me because here's the thing, right? I don't care what you say. I've seen it. Steroids, why do they take them? And let's not just call them steroids. There's a million PEDs out there. And in my mind, there's still stuff going on. But why do they do that stuff? Because it works. It makes you a better hitter. It makes everything improves. Your hand-eye twitching, fast twitch muscles, confidence. You don't get tired. All those things work and make you a better player. That's why they took it, and that's why the sport was overrun with it. But now we're looking at Major League Baseball. They're in bed with all the betting sites, which is fine. It's America. But Shoeless Joe Jackson can't get in to the Hall of Fame. So that bothers me too. And actually, I did a piece on Shula's Joe on Ball 9 about 6 weeks ago. That's pretty interesting. So where does it end? Pete Rose. I dealt with Pete Rose all the time. Pete was a fun guy to deal with, not the brightest guy in the world. Like I remember asking him a question once when he was managing the Reds. We were sitting in his office, and he started telling a story about like 7th grade, I think it was. And he said, "Now, was that the first time I was in 7th grade, or was that the second time I was in 7th grade?" But that's Pete. You know, Pete.
He seems like the jock that was really great in high school, and he has that jock type attitude.
Exactly. That's what he was.
Yeah,
that's what he was, and that's who he is. And and now, so I'm starting to think, well, you can bet on games, you can bet on like World Series late inning games, you can do all this stuff. And the one thing I will say about Rose, the only thing I will say defending him is that it's never been proven he bet against his team. But the reality, of course, is if you're betting every day and you don't put a bet down on your team that day, you don't think your team's winning that day. So
right. Why wouldn't you bet every day?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the bookies figure that out, obviously.
And they changed the lines probably.
Yes, and but having said that, where we're at now, I think it's hypocritical of baseball. So I kind of, it depends on the mood I'm in that day when I fill out that ballot. But there was one time I voted for both Clemens and Bonds, and I walked into the Yankee spring training clubhouse that year after I was at the Mets for a while, and Reggie Jackson, as soon as I walked in, Reggie said to me, "Kevin, what the hell are you doing voting for those guys?" So that's a pretty interesting comment, and I'm going to the rest of our conversation, but it was an interesting conversation we had, and so that gives you some insight into what the guys in the Hall of Fame think about the steroid guys. But you could also make the argument now, well, maybe there's some steroid guys in the Hall of Fame that kind of slip through the cracks. And so where do you draw the line? And why do you continue to pick on Bonds and Clemens? So it'll be very interesting this year where their vote tally goes, because I think they're going to shockingly, I think people are going to be surprised how close they will be to get in.
Do you think Rose will get in eventually, or what's your vote for him?
Now, Rose has not even been on the ballot for the writers, so I know the writers get criticized for not putting Rose in the Hall of Fame, but really we have nothing to do with it. MLB took him off the ballot, and he wasn't on the ballot. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. Rose, I look at it a little differently. He is the all-time hits leader, and I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. Even though and again, that upsets a lot of people. People when I write about stuff like that, people go crazy. How could you put him? But at the same time, it's a museum, right? It's not heaven, and it's part of the baseball story. And I'm also tired of being on the wall, but the last guy on the wall, but there are writers that think like me, and that's why they're not in the Hall of Fame. So that's where we're at.
This is exciting for me to talk to you, Kevin. Let me pause for a second. How are you on time?
I'm fine.
You're okay? Okay. Kevin, this is exciting for me to talk about because I'm a Yankee fan, and he hasn't gotten in. I have an argument. We argue ferociously with my friends. I think he should be in. They say he shouldn't because he hasn't played long enough. You know who I'm going for here, Thurman Munson. What's your opinion on him?
Well, you should read the story I did for the Post last year.
Okay.
Google me, Thurman Munson, Hall of Fame. It'll pop up.
Okay.
I was very lucky to get some people who really did much more investigative work than I could have done. And I quoted them, and I've always felt this because Munson was the kind of guy. I was at the age where Munson, I followed him through coming up in the sporting news and the minor leagues, so I was really a Munson fan. He should be in the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt in my mind. And I laid all out. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I laid all out. That 10-year span, and that's what the Hall of Fame says, 10 years. He had a 10-year span that was phenomenal. He was the best. He did everything. MVP, World Series. If you look at his numbers in that 10-year span compared to other guys who are in the Hall of Fame now, like Fisk and even Bench, he matches up or he's better. So it's a joke that he's not in the Hall of Fame. And it's more of a joke that the Hall of Fame, and I love the people at the Hall of Fame. They're really good people. but I don't love some of the groups that they put together that make these decisions. The committees. In my mind, how does Harold Baines, the compiler, get in the Hall of Fame when Thurman Munson is in the Hall of Fame? Well, probably the answer to that is the people who are on the committee knew Harold Baines or were close to Reinsdorf or whatever, and they voted for him. The problem that Munson has is his former Yankee teammates and Yankees in the Hall of Fame have not spoken up enough for him to be on those committees to say, hey, let's get this guy in the Hall of Fame. And it's funny, there's always somebody that keeps you out. I don't know who those people are, but clearly somebody's keeping Munson out of the Hall of Fame that is got big power. And by that, I mean like a former player of some sort who just, they don't push for him enough. It's really that simple. But he did everything that you should be in the Hall of Fame. And the argument is very simple. Well, he only played 10 years. Well, the Hall of Fame says you only got a 10-year, they look over a 10-year span. So his 10-year span was phenomenal. And that's
then you wonder, like with Rose, like I have the argument with my friends. Oh, they're not likable. Munson was tough on the sports writers, so they don't like him. That plays into it.
Well,
I don't know.
When he was being voted on, definitely, because some sports writers can tell you what they want,
right?
But, I'm sure some guys did hold certain things against him, and that was the argument. Everybody, with some different guys through the years. Ted Williams was like that, and but for the most part, I've seen the writers. And Reggie said this, and I thought this was a good comment by Reggie. Reggie has said, and this is kind of where he stands on things in general. He said that, if the writers don't vote you in, why should I vote you in? And that's it. He kind of leaves it up to the writers. And it was a 15-year period at one point, like Jack Morris, for example. I voted for Jack Morris. I always thought Jack Morris should be in. And I think the committee did a great job there, getting a guy that should be in the Hall of Fame in the Hall of Fame. By the way, the Blake Snell game, I think was what was it, 91? It was the exact date, I think, is Morris pitching 10 innings, and a shutout for 10 innings. So that's how the game has changed. And that's how you lose fans in the game too, because if you can't root for your guy who's pitching a shutout, because you got to they got to bring in a guy who's given up runs in 6 straight games, then something's wrong with the game. And I look at it the same way with the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame, I think the Hall of Fame, in my mind, why wouldn't they want it's a business. Why wouldn't they want Thurman in the Hall of Fame? It'd be much more, you go up and see a plaque. Now, Thurman is in the Hall of Fame in many different ways, as are Clemens and Bonds. But, so you get more people and that's why the Jeter thing, it was it would have been a fun year, because I go to the Hall of Fame every year or two. It would have been a fun year having Jeter in and seeing the reaction, and because the big year that I went, I remember, was the Ripken win year where they set the record with fans, and I think this would have toppled that record. So I'm all about the Hall of Fame. I think it's great, and even if you disagree, like I do with some of the moves here and there, it's great. It's great to talk about. Keeps the game alive.
I saw a interview you did, Kevin, and you said to the fellow, next time I got to tell you about a Munson Goose Gossard story. I got it for the quick version of that, if you can.
Yeah.
If not, I got a few more questions.
I'll give you the quick version, but
all right.
Actually, I am getting. It's very nice. I want to blow my own horn here for a second. I'm getting inducted into the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame. It was supposed to be done already, November 1st, but obviously that was put on hold. And I think it's now in April. But and I'll
congratulations. I would have thought it would have been sooner, actually, but I'm glad they finally made the move.
It's a nice group. Rennie LaRue, who runs it, does a great job. Tremendous knowledge of the game, and he also does something with the New York State Basketball Hall of Fame, and it's a Hall of Fame that deals with all levels, so it's not just the pro level. But I think there's only one other baseball writer in the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame, so it's really nice. I know I'll never get into the big Hall of Fame, but that's okay.
There are writers in there, right, Kevin? In the big Hall of Fame,
every year a writer gets selected.
Okay.
And there's guys that are in there that should be, and there's plenty of guys in there that shouldn't be. But sometimes it's a fan contest, but that's what makes it interesting. And Well, so anyway, getting back to Goose and Munson, the job has changed tremendously, but it's an interesting job where you got to have a thick skin. And I remember the first time I walked into the Yankee clubhouse, and I went right to Munson because I wanted to do a story. And it was a big clubhouse back then, the old 77 Yankee Stadium. And I asked Thurman, I said, Thurman, you got a second? And he yells across the clubhouse, huge clubhouse. You got a picture of this. And I'm just I'm a kid, but I'm a kid that grew up in Jersey, so I got.
Is this the 76 stadium, not the original?
Yeah, this is
Okay.
this is post. This is 1970.
Okay.
It's either 76 or 77.
Okay.
So it's that year. So 77 it would have been. Yeah. So he yells out across the clubhouse. Goose is way on the other end. Hey Goose! Hey Goose! So now everybody in the clubhouse turns and looks. And this would crack me up a little bit about the media today. How people get upset if they get called a name or something like that. So Thurman looks at me and says, Goose, look at this bleeping red-headed leprechaun wanting to ask me a question.
Whoa.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I grew up in Jersey, so I let him go, and I knew what he was doing, and it was fun. Back then you get tested as a young writer, and he might have repeated it, but it was now everybody's looking. Goose is looking. Goose, everybody's getting a good laugh out of it, and I just said, "Hey, are we done yet?" And he goes, "Yeah, kid. What do you need?" And then he was wonderful, So it was just like a little bit of a gauntlet, and that's the way it was back then. Now and I'm sure we could do it because we're podcasting, but the colorful language, the situation, and the irony, of course, is that years later, on the 20th anniversary, this is another great story to look up. I went on the 20th anniversary of his death. I went to Canton and spent time with Thurman and his Thurman's family and his wife, and got some amazing stuff. I went to the airport, saw the files of what actually happened with the plane, and with Thurman and how he died and everything, and the stories from his Diana about the family and how tough it was. It's amazing stories. So. Mm-hmm. And then also later on, I was one of the writers who started digging up the information. Like, hey, how come Goose Gossage isn't in the Hall of Fame? He was throwing 3 innings closing. And so by getting that information out there with a couple other writers, I helped lead the charge to get Goose in the Hall of Fame. So that's just the irony of the story later on. And Goose is a close friend. I can call Goose anytime. And Goose, by the way, Goose hates analytics to the 10th degree and what's happened to the game today. That's why you don't see him much around the game.
Okay. Thanks for sharing the stories. I'm a big Munson fan, so I love hearing this stuff. When I was a kid, he was my guy. After Mercer.
And again, Munson, he played hard. He was there for his teammates. I was in the bleachers when he hit that one home run in the playoffs. That was amazing. And to me, he was everything a player should be. And he changed the culture, and he was just enough of a, he was just enough of a kind of get guys going. Every team needs that kind of guy. That's one of my things with the Mets. I think the Mets are too many nice guys.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You need a guy in there that's going to stir it up a little bit. And then when the Yankees got Reggie, that made it even more forceful.
Right.
And baseball needs that. It's just too hard a sport, and even, and again, going back to today's game, because I'm tapped in. I knew the Dodgers pretty much knew that they were going to win the World Series once the Red Sox made that trade. You don't trade away Mookie Betts, who does so many things, and he runs the bases. Talk about analytics. Running the bases has been lost now. Running the bases can be a huge advantage. And I've said it all along, and I told Jeter this, and Jeter is starting to do this. I told him and Gary Dembo, his right-hand man, just run the bases better, play defense, push your starter pitching, and you'll be a better team. And look at that. I know the playoffs were watered down, but they made the playoffs this year. They did well for them. And a team that plays more baseball is going to be more successful in the future. And that's what Mookie Betts did to the Dodgers. He took them over the analytical hump. he made them more of a baseball team than an analytics team driven team. And he was very, that play where he scored from third base. So he had a few of those plays in the playoffs. That's what baseball is, getting a read. Nobody gets a secondary lead anymore. You see so many guys throwing out at home because they don't know how to get a secondary lead at third base. Watch Mookie Betts play the game, and you see that. And how even that goofy play where the Dodgers lost that one game at the end where they got the base hit and the error. Mookie almost made a Derek Jeter-like play. He was there to back up the center fielder when the ball kicked off his glove, and then made the throw home. So Mookie Betts, the Red Sox trading Mookie Betts was we saw the dumbest move this year with Kevin Cash, and I think we've seen the dumbest trade maybe since Babe Ruth by the Red Sox for some what do they, I forget, payroll flexibility. And that's the problem, and that's why the Mets got to be on top, just to bring everything back full circle. One of the reasons I believe the Mets have to get Trevor Bauer is that if the Dodgers get him, it's really going to make it that much tougher for the Mets, because don't forget, they're going to have to go through the Dodgers, in the future. And having Betts, and now you get another ace like that. So it's, there's a lot of problems with baseball now, but there's also a lot of interesting things going on.
Well, it'd be cool if the Mets could get that guy with the edge, some great guy that had that edge. Me and my wife talk about it. Wouldn't it be great if there was some kind of player like that now?
Well, there's two players out there like that they could get. Well, I would say Springer more than Realmuto. Realmuto is a solid, tremendous catcher. I think Springer plays with an edge. And again, going back to the whole game, which I watched, college, high school, whatever. When Springer made that catch for UConn in the NCAAs, I was telling all my scouts friends, especially the Yankees and Mets, you got to draft this guy. This guy's a winner. But they don't look at that stuff anymore. They don't understand how great a catch is in a big moment. They just clog it up with a game played in April against Concordia. You know what I'm saying? So it's like that's where baseball has failed. It doesn't understand. It doesn't understand that big moments come, and only certain players can achieve big things in big moments. And we talked about a few already, but the Reggies, the Thurman Munsons, Mookie Betts, these guys, they get it done in that. It's not just another game. And the analytics want to throw everything in the same pile. It's just another game. That's my biggest problem with analytics. And the reason it's that way, Ray, is because most of the analytic guys are guys that don't really understand the game, never played the game to that degree. And now it's getting worse because they're getting rid of so many good baseball people, scouts, development people. I won't mention the organization, but a friend of mine called me the other day. He's a manager in an organization, and he was just released, and they're getting way too much power, the analytical people, and as a result, baseball is suffering for it.
A couple more questions, Ken, then I want to get into my hit and miss, our word association. And I love talking to baseball guys because I always, baseball is a great sport for arguing. You always got the statistics, and, the greats are always like from years ago because they had to compile those unbelievable statistics like a Lou Gehrig stats, like no one now, it seems, you can't get to that, it seems, unless
they won't let you get to that.
Right. Are they skewed from back then because of the, maybe the fielding wasn't as good, or is it an accurate, compilation compared to now?
You know what? It's not.
I don't know if you know where I'm going with that. Those stats were like unbelievable back then.
Let's get out of this Zoom StreamYard for a second. Just, here's like this is a Gil McDougall glove,
right,
from the 50s. By the way, that's another great story I wrote.
Is that really his glove?
Well, it's not. No, not necessarily his glove.
Oh, it's on the. I got you.
But I picked it up somewhere. But I did a story. There's a company in Minnesota called D&J Glove Repair, and they do story. And it's one of the stories I did. They find that people send in their gloves and they kind of refurbish and fix them. If a dog gets them or something like that. And there's some amazing stories. Again, it's on ball9.com. But like they would get gloves. From a soldier who was killed in Afghanistan. His parents would find his glove and they want to get it refixed. And it's amazing stories. So the point is with this glove is it's not as good as it's good. It's a good glove. It's got really good leather. but it's a different glove than what they're playing now. So yeah, there's all kinds of changes. Obviously the Jackie Robinson situation. Getting the great players, athletes. Great Jackie Robinson. Think about Jackie Robinson. He was beyond breaking the color barrier. This guy, and beyond being a great athlete, he was so smart about how to play the game, and the intelligence level is so important. The baseball IQ is huge. So I can't tell you the baseball IQ of those guys from back then. That's where I have no clue what it was like in the Babe Ruth.
Would Ruth or Gehrig have had the same stats if the black player or the Spanish player, was playing back then?
I think there would be and again, Babe Ruth is one of the things I addressed in that column I did on. He was so pro black player. He was trying to get the black player in the game then, and even in that column, I believe this is very interesting. He never managed, even though he was allowed to manage. He wanted to manage, and at the end of his career, and after his playing career, and there was some talk that the people in charge of baseball back then didn't want Ruth to manage because they knew he would be the first. He would have brought the black player into the game, which is fascinating. So Jackie Robinson would have happened a lot earlier, and so I think they would have. The great players are always great players, and they're gonna have great success no matter what. That's the way I look at it, and so I think those guys would have had similar numbers, absolutely. But I also think there would have been other great players that we never really got to appreciate because they were not given the chance to play. And, but everything from the gloves, the personnel, everything's different. Also, there was a lot. Let's look at it. The ballparks. With these ballparks now are bandboxes. I mean,
right?
It's a joke. The ball is a joke. I call it the Manfred ball, but it's like an F-15. And again, I know the game. I've been watching balls hit off the bats forever, and I'm seeing balls now that just continue to go and go and go and go. The ball is so juiced, it's a joke.
I hit one of them with my son. I got one, and I was pitching to him, and that one was like really flying out. I'm like, wow.
They're like Titleists, and so I think things are skewed for the hitter now in many ways, and then and that's why the hitter won't take advantage of the green spaces, which I talked about earlier. So yeah, it's a different game, different players from different eras. But like I said, I always think Lou Gehrig would have been great, Babe Ruth would have been great, all those guys would have been, and I think they they played the game their whole lives and they looked at it differently, and they also practiced defense. This is a big thing, right? Nobody practices defense anymore. Tony Gwynn, every time when we were on a road trip, especially when we played the Eastern teams, which back then you didn't play as much. When he got to Three Rivers or when he got to Philadelphia, the first thing Tony would do would go to right field, have a coach hit him a bucket or two of balls off the wall, this and that, see how everything played. I never see anything like that anymore, But back then they would always work on it, and that was a joke of watching some of the playoff games where the announcers were talking about, well, we're doing different ballparks and blah blah blah. And for a fact, some of these guys didn't even bother to take balls off the wall. They didn't even know how it was gonna play. I'm sure the coaches told them, but that's the way it is now. They showed them video, maybe, but they didn't actually go out there and do it. So ballparks were different back then. The ball was different. The infields, how different would it? Talk about infields. Tony Kubek, the bad hop in Pittsburgh in 1960. These infields now that they play on are immaculate. So there's so many different things you say about the game. That's why I just appreciate every different generation and let them stand on their own.
Good. And the pitching may not have been as good back then, right? Because the fastballs were probably 90.
It obviously wasn't the same speed.
Yeah.
But I believe the ability to pitch, the ability to command, and don't forget too, and even from just like 20 years ago, this is a much different radar gun than the old radar gun. When Nolan Ryan was clocked at 98, 99, he was probably 102 with this gun. You know what I'm saying?
It's juiced up. More.
Just the gun, like the ball of the gun, is juiced up as well.
Okay.
And And
Because they want to show it on the scoreboard that the fans say, oh, 102.
part of the entertainment, yeah, the
Yeah.
whole
Is
thing.
it someone just actually pushing it? I wonder, is it a real number, you know?
I think
Let's
it's
put
a
102
number,
up there.
but the way they calibrate it is different. That's
Okay.
the point.
Okay.
You know, it's probably a better calibration. This might be a truer number, but I'm not saying those guys didn't throw that much because
Right.
the guns weren't as advanced.
Right.
So everything is different, and you know, the lights. How about the lights? You know, when they did move to those kind of things. And that's the interesting thing about, like you said earlier, when you go to a Babe Ruth museum or something like that, you learn some things that you just never realized. And history, and I'm going to make a political statement here in a way. History is so important, good or bad. And for us as as fans and as writers, we have to understand the history of the game, just like you have to understand the history of America, good or bad. You know, the tearing down the statues, in my mind, is a friggin' joke. You know, so you know, same thing with the Hall of Fame. You know, get the history in there. These guys cheated or whatever. And Barry Bonds, for example. You know, I knew Barry when he was skinny Barry Bonds, and then when he got to be big Barry Bonds. And next time I'm on, I'll tell you a Barry Bonds story, because he was close friends with Tony Gwynn. So I got along really well with Barry. And you know, so everything changes. Enjoy the moment. But I do think if baseball got back to defense, base running, and some other things, and understanding what players are really, you know, step up in big times, I think it's never easier to build a team. That's why when Cohen says he wants to I want to win a World Series in 3 to 5 years, I definitely think it can happen. And you can almost change a team overnight these days.
Cool stuff. Cool stuff. Kevin, I want to get into my hit and miss right now. First word that comes to your mind. You ready for this?
Sure.
Okay. What is your favorite color?
Red, because I have red hair.
Okay. If you were in a foxhole, outside of family members, who would you have in the foxhole with you?
I would have George Patton.
Okay. That's a good
Patton.
one. Yeah. He'll have your back. Right?
Yep.
All right. Now, if you're on a deserted island for 3 years, 85-degree weather, perfect weather, it's different than you're thinking. What music would you bring with you? What album? If you had to bring an album.
Yeah. I think again, I like all kinds of music. I'm a music guy. I love music all times, but I really like Tapestry by Carole King would be a nice island.
Okay.
You know, because it has different range of songs in there, and there is no perfect album if you're stuck for 3 years, but that would be one I would. You know, that was a good one, and you know, so that would be fun. And of course, you want to hear some fun music too, and you know, keep you going so you're not going crazy. So, you know, Don't Stop Believing, it's got to be a single you can bring in.
Now, you were a 60s guy, right? So you were into that full 60s music scene, I would
60s,
imagine.
yeah. I really got into music in the 70s, but I was 60. I had older brothers, so, you know, we had the record players and the 45s.
Right. Excuse me. What is your favorite movie?
Oh, geez. I hate to be so baseballish. I like a lot of movies. You know, I like a lot of movies, but yeah, I like The Natural. I thought The Natural was a good movie.
Okay. What was your best part in the movie?
The worst part was when he was thrown with the kid because it just didn't look right. And
At the end of the movie?
Yeah. And I put Field of Dreams in that too. You know, I may put Field of Dreams over that simply because it's a little bit more fun and a little more humor. So let's go with Field of Dreams, and obviously the part where when he finds out it's his dad and he wants to have a catch. I did a story many years ago with the producer of that movie, and you know, and why he phrased that sentence the way he did, you know, and because everybody was kind of, some people, because he said want to have a catch, or well, how he phrased it, but it wasn't exactly the way people say it nowadays. But there was a reason why he did it. So I think that was a great scene with the father.
I'm a movie buff myself, and you mentioned the you didn't like the end of that natural with the catch. I'm just curious why. To me, I'm thinking on it. It seemed okay. What didn't you like about it?
I wanted to see the kid have a little better motion. Wanted
Excuse
to be
me?
more like the way the kid threw the ball.
Yeah. Oh, he didn't throw it right? Or?
Yeah, he didn't quite throw it right in the field. And again,
Okay.
you can take that attempt degree and say, well, he didn't have his dad there growing up, so he didn't learn. But
Okay.
if he was if the natural was the dad, the kid should have been semi-natural.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
This is a small point, small crazy.
Yeah. I'll have to notice that next time, actually, to go on my DVD later. What is your all-time team around the horn quick?
Oh God, you're
You could go from 60 on, or you could give me the all-time one.
well, you got to have Ray Rosiana. No, I'm kidding. The Rays outfielder,
Uh-huh.
Rosarina. Well, all-time team. Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Mickey Mantle. I get Mickey Mantle in there somehow just because he's Mickey Mantle. Yogi Berra. I love Yogi because the way he was Yogi would never even be looked at in today's game by the analytic guys. God forbid he didn't walk enough. I would probably go. I might go Ripken. I'd go Ripken in there somewhere. Third base maybe. And now this is my Yankee prejudice here. But then this will shock you. I'll go Bobby Richardson at second base simply because this guy, he got out when he should have got out. He was a great leader. He's a great person, and I still love talking to a guy like that. So and he was the glue for that great Yankee team. In so many ways. MVP of the 60 World Series. I think he was the only MVP of non-winning team. And Garrett probably at first base. I know I'm missing some great players, and I apologize for that, and I don't want to hear about it on Twitter. And who's my shortstop? Because I'm sick of Ripken at third base, I think. I tell you what, though, Brooks Robinson was a great third baseman, too. So I'm putting Brooks at third simply because he was Brooks. And shortstop. Who do you have in your great shortstops?
Oh boy, Jeter comes to mind. Those old guys had those stats back then.
He's so Yankee, people go crazy.
They say he wasn't a great fielder, but whenever I watched him for that run, he seemed like he made the plays.
That's the one of the craziest things ever for people. It's like, believe what your eyes are telling you, and he knew where to set up. That's why he got the plays. And how many ground balls did you worry about when they would hit the shortstop in big situations? So that's the hell. We'll make it an all-time Yankee team pretty much. We'll put him there simply. And again, the flip play was a great. That's why I'm bringing out Mookie Betts. It was a great play to make. So that's my off the top of the head without any research. All-time team. It would certainly change if I thought about it a little deeper.
And I used to go see Ripken when he, in the 90s when he played the Yanks, and he'd almost would get me upset and mad. I'm a Yankee fan because he made it look so easy. It's like it doesn't even look like he's trying out there. It was like scary how easy he made it all look.
And again, I'm taking some of these when you give me these questions. I'm looking at the big picture because I know a lot of these guys afterwards.
Right.
So when I put Ripken out there, it's because I also remember several conversations I had with Ripken on the back porch of the Otasaga Hotel, where we'd start talking about hitting, and all of a sudden he would break down into his stance and tell me why he did certain things. That's a guy who's thinking 24/7 baseball, and that means a lot in how I'm putting guys in where they belong. But
2,600 games is pretty
well,
freaky.
again, getting back to records, they won't let you. They won't even let you go to the ballpark that much anymore. You got to have what do they call it. You got to have those days where they manage your workload days.
Have you been to any games at all during this pandemic? I'm just curious what it's like at the game. They pump that music, that crowd noise in. Is it?
No, I was not. I did not go to any game.
Okay.
My father. Like I said, I went to a minor league game, and that was fun. I'm not, but my friends that I talk to, it's really weird. It's really weird,
it's weird when you're at it. Yeah.
Baseball missed a great opportunity, and we started to see a little bit in the postseason. They pumped the crowd noise in so loud that I always said that. I said this in the beginning. First of all, I said, just so you know, in other podcasts and places, when they said, "Oh, we'll never have all the season," and I said, "No, we're playing the whole season. We're playing the season. It's going to be a World Series." I just felt that we'd get through this thing, and they did. And I knew that the money was on the other end, so they would get it. And I think if you had just if you had put more mics on the field and really picked up the conversations of the umpires and the players, now some of it might have been potentially embarrassing, but you let the players know beforehand, hey, there's mics everywhere, just be aware.
Mhm.
And you could have really picked up some great baseball information, because that's what fans want. NFL fans love the behind the scenes stuff. Who didn't love NFL films growing up?
Mhm.
Baseball had an opportunity, because you didn't have the noise of the fans, to
Mhm.
suddenly have, oh, that's what they do. That's how it's done.
I was hoping for that before the season they were going to do
And
that.
I wrote
Yeah.
about that and said baseball should do it. But of course, baseball didn't do it, because baseball can be idiotic at times. But if we had all that byplay, and you got some of it, I think that was the best thing to come out of the way the game was played this year, was we got back to what I call American Legion baseball, where that bench on the first base side and that bench at the third base side were going at each other the whole game, just like it's an American Legion game, and you got and so I really believe the whole kumbaya thing went to hell this year, because guys really were starting to dislike each other because there was the old competitive thing going on. And I think that was a great thing for baseball this year.
And we really don't know, right, for next year. I guess pretty soon they'll be planning it, but there's no idea, right?
Do we know anything with in the country, really, with what
No,
depends?
no.
I'm lucky that I live in Florida. I have a governor who lets us go out, and the friends that I have that have small businesses, thank God, can run their restaurants and small businesses and not go under, and things like that. And I got to say, uh, knock on wood, but where I live, things have been pretty damn good.
Good, good.
I actually attended a wedding last week. So we're smart down here, but we're also not crazy. So that's been good. So do we know about next year? I'm hearing all kinds of rumors. I'm hearing what I'm hearing, just to update you from people that I've talked to in the game. It could be like spring training could start in May next year. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
It all depends too. Pfizer
Right.
the announcement the other day. Boom.
Mhm.
Hopefully things go well, and we get through this. People stay healthy, because nobody wants to see anybody get sick.
Right, right. And if they could get some fans in there, it'd be nice, like just
It's
like the NFL
ludicrous.
does. Huh?
Ludicrous that fans haven't been in there.
Yeah, yeah. Those
The
mannequins
stadium,
don't cut it,
yeah, the stadiums are huge. There's smart ways to do things. And like I said, if I can go to a game on September 3rd with 2,000 other people in a stadium that seats 4,000 people, if that many, and I can go to the concession stands and get drinks and get a slippery banana drink, which is a nice drink I recommend everybody to have if they go to a Savannah Bananas game, and some other cocktails, then Major League Baseball could have done it. But I believe, they were a little running scared because of the lawyers and what possibly could be.
Ah, okay. So that comes into play. Yeah,
It always does.
it always comes in. Couple more hit and misses, and we'll wrap it up. I want to talk about ball 9. We'll wrap her up a little more on that. Ford Seaver Gibson. We had some of that generation is starting to go now. Basketball's Tommy Heinsohn passed away. Give me a quick couple sentences on each one of those pitchers.
Well, Gibson, even to this day, and I would have no problem putting Gibson on my mound for you for that question you asked me.
Okay.
But he was that kind of player. Great athlete. I love great athletes. Jake DeGrom. Why is he successful as a pitcher? Because he's a great athlete. Gibson was the same way. Could hit. Another thing baseball screwed up, they stopped letting pitchers hit. And I'm talking about in the minor leagues, they don't let them hit. So how are they going to get any better?
So you don't like the designated hitter?
It's got to be done now, because pitchers can't hit at all, because they won't
Okay.
allow them to hit in the minor leagues. I don't like it. It could have been better, because there's so many things you can do strategy wise with and the DH in one league is fine, but to have them both. But that's the whole plan. If you really sit back and look, right, the plan is to make baseball all one. Every team having the same amount of minor leagues. Every team, I call it socialistic baseball, and that's what's happening in a way. And that's just another example of it. And all teams being DH, and no individuality in the sport. I mean, if you want to have 7 minor league teams, why can't you have it? I mean, you go all the way out to the St. Louis Cardinals way back when they had all those things going on. So, but Gibson, Gibson to me, when I saw him at the Hall of Fame, I would sit and chat with him, and I was still intimidated when he was like 70-some years old, and I'm no young guy. I'm 67, and he'd be still intimidating. Whitey Ford, nicest guy in the world, but you can also see Whitey Ford. Whitey Ford had that look. Like if you were in a group, and again, you're going to a Jersey bar in the middle of summer, you're with your buddies. Whitey Ford was the guy who would do something that would get you guys in trouble and then sneak out the back door. That's how we looked at Whitey. He was sly. And, a wonderful man, fun to talk to. And again, I'm very lucky that I got to talk to a lot of these guys at the Hall of Fame. And then and Tom Seaver, I have a bottle of his wine over here. Loved it. Remember doing a big piece about him and his winery. Seaver really was. To me, Seaver was the all-American kid in how he did everything. He was in the military. His wife, a perfect marriage. Really loved when baseball was over. He was still involved as a broadcaster, but I think that was just to make money so he could do his wine thing. And he went on to a new career. And I remember one day talking to him. We were talking about the old truck he had that he used in his vineyard. And he would take his old truck around, and he would kid about his wife, because again they had a great relationship. But he would kid that's his truck, and she doesn't get in his truck. And I said, well, how do you do that? How do you keep her out of it? Because the dog is always in my truck. The dog hair is in my truck. She doesn't want any dog hair on her clothes. So that's a cute little. Tom Seaver was a good man.
And his wife was one of the most popular wives in the 70s. I know she was beautiful back then, and every kid remembered Tom Seaver's wife.
Nancy Seaver, yeah. And back then I think that was probably, if you think about it, the first crowd shots when they would find Nancy in the crowd, and she was she was very popular, and because it was a little bit of if there's anything, not to get too heavy here, but it's, to me, Tom Seaver and Nancy were like Camelot of baseball, the Kennedy.
Good analogy. Yeah. Greatest sports writer of all time.
I would go. That's a good one. Red Smith, I would say. Red Smith was to me, because Red was, you got sports writers from way back, and that was a different era back then. Vin Scully and I have talked about that because Vin came from that era. And Ben was a very pro sports writers guy, because when radio came on the scene and TV, I mean, with Ben, he got treated pretty crappily by the teams early on, because the booth would be way up there, and the writers went to bat for Ben. He told me, and he gave me some examples. I can't think off the top of my head, but the writers would say, no, he's covering just like we're covering. He needs to have the same respect. So that was a different era back then. Dick Young obviously went in the clubhouse, opened some things up. But Red Smith, to me, was such a good writer and could write any subject. And plus, I had the joy of sitting next to him at a few Knick games early on in my career and asking him questions, and he gave me some great answers I'll just give you one of them now. But he said, I said, Red, why'd you want to become a sports writer? And at the time, he's probably late 70s, I'm guessing. And he goes, and I think he liked me because, again, getting back to my red hair, what's left of it. He said, I wanted to live like a millionaire, but I didn't want to have the hassles. And,
okay.
And if you think about his era of sports writing, that's what it was. The travel was the best. The teams, just one small thing, but sitting on courtside is so different now than sitting in the fourth deck where they put the media. I would have, when I covered the Knicks and stuff and the Celtics and Bird, Magic and Jordan, they were right there. They'd come over and talk to you during a timeout. So that made me a better writer. And and again, Red lived like a millionaire, and he didn't have the hassles that a millionaire had to have of gathering that money and keeping the money.
I like that. You mentioned Vince Scully. Would he be the greatest sportscaster ever for baseball?
Without a doubt, because he never made it about him, and he always thought of the fans first, and he was a poet. I mean, he's still a poet. I talked to him recently on a piece I did on Jackie Robinson, the stories he told me. The piece was actually on Gil Hodges, so speaking of another man who should be in the Hall of Fame. And Ben told me some great stories that everybody talks about Pee Wee Reese and the things he did for Jackie Robinson, which were great, and they were great teammates. But he said Gil Hodges was really the guy who protected Jackie. He was the muscle. In other words, if there was a hard slide in the second base, Gil Hodges would reach in, and he was a strong man back then, much stronger than most of the players. And he'd just pick him off the pile like that, And
he was an ex-Marine, or a former Marine.
Guadalcanal.
Yes.
I mean, unbelievable Marine. I mean, this is
right.
Marine. And that's another thing. He lost a couple of years because of the war. And, he won some big-time medals. So Vince Scully had a way of telling the story. And even to say, if you go on my Twitter page, my pinned tweet has always been a picture of me and Vin, standing together. And he would always, when I wrote about him on occasion, he would just be so complimentary. And I did one column on that. It was a good column, I got to say. I can't, as he was nearing his retirement. The next day I walked into the lounge at Dodger Stadium to get a soda or coffee. And I hear behind me, he walked in behind me. It was Kevin, that was the best article I've ever, so that's who Vince Scully is. And he also was, he never missed Saturday night mass. He went to Saturday evening mass all the time, and he's lived a great life. And I know they got they have a great piece on MLB Network, which been recently that I watched again.
Nice tribute. Kevin, if you had one wish in the world tomorrow, I'm a genie. I'm going to grant this wish. What would your wish be?
I would wish that everybody kind of gets back to normal. Nothing too deep. Gets back to normal, and we have our lives back.
Imagine how great that will be after you go through this. When you finally get, it's probably like after World War II or something. When they're celebrating and that kind of thing.
To some extent, and that's again not to be. But that's one. At least I can say, if I want to go, like today, normally I didn't go today, but we have like I told you, I like sports, and I'm part of the St. John's, the county I live in down here. Sports Council has a Thursday meeting luncheon. So we go every Thursday, and they bring in different speakers from high school guys who played in the NFL, writers, whatever. And it's a fun thing to do. But if I wanted to go to that today, I can go to it, and it's actually in a bar, and it's comfortable, and and people are smart, so there is some normalcy, but let's get all back to normal.
Did you go to St. John's yourself?
No. This is St. John's, the county, not.
Oh.
I went to. I'm a good Jersey guy, and I went to a state college in New Jersey, Ramapo College.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I went to Glassboro State.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Is that? That's. And actually, we used to play those guys all the time, and long ride. And my daughter also played basketball and softball in college, so I'm very familiar with all the other schools. Right.
Last hit and miss here. One person in the world, Kevin, to meet tomorrow. I'm going to let you meet this person, alive or dead. No biblical figures.
Yeah, I know.
Who would it be?
You know what? I'm gonna go off the probably a guy you haven't heard before. But everything I've read about him, he just seems like an interesting guy. Would be Harry Truman. Harry Truman was he was a very forceful person, but he also kept his roots. Bob Wolf, the great sportscaster, he passed away not too long ago. Bob and I were good friends, and Bob he was in Washington D.C. for many years, and so he was very politically oriented. So a lot of times on road trips back in the day, when he was covering, he would make little excursions, and he would sometimes visit ex-presidents, like libraries and museums or places of where. Well, one day he goes and visits Harry Truman's house, and lo and behold, I don't know how he set it up, but lo and behold, Harry Truman and Bess are out there on the porch or veranda, and he has lemonade and speaks to Harry Truman, who was, I think is one of our most underrated presidents, because what he had to deal with, and the wars he had with internal political units was pretty interesting as well. But I would think Harry Truman got us out of World War II, had the guts to, make a very tough decision.
Dropped the big one, right? He dropped it.
Dropped the big one, and really, from what I can read, and I've read a few books on him and stuff, and including, I think there's one called Plain Speaking, which is basically him just talking. He didn't lose a minute of sleep over it. He made his decision, realized what the risks were, and how many soldiers would die, in that situation, and made the decision. So he would be a fascinating guy to hang out with and have dinner with.
When he left the presidency, I don't believe he had a lot of money, right? He lived sort of just a normal type of life, like you said, on the porch having lemonade.
Yeah, back then, when you left politics, you weren't, $80 million in your pocket like now, like some people that leave politics. And so yeah, he had to make money. He had to make money, and never really. I think that's why he wrote those books that he wrote, because he needed to. An ex-president can always write a book.
Yeah. He looked pretty cool too. I liked his look.
Yeah, he had a great look, and and really his, going back to World War I and stuff, and the friends that he had his entire life, very interesting people. I mean, it's he seemed like maybe that's the word I'm looking for. He seemed like a loyal person to his community, his country, and his family.
The buck stops here, right? That was him.
Buck stops here.
Yeah. Kevin, tell us about Ball 9. How you got the name? It's a great name. I don't know if it's 9 innings or 9 just happens to be like a pretty nice number to remember.
Well, someday you have to have Chris on, because vitality, and Chris is a former musician, so you guys might, or he's still.
Okay. Oh, that'd be nice. Yeah.
He would. I'm sure he would love to be on. And
is he the owner of it, or?
It's got the baseball, like it's a perfect baseball name. Obviously, 9 players, 9 in the lineup.
Right.
I didn't do it, so I don't know how they got it.
Okay.
It was there before me. I kind of like it. And this is a B9 hat, Ball 9 hat. And it's ball9.com and Ball9 tweet. If you go just Ball9 on Twitter, you'll come up with some Chinese crazy website. So it's Ball9 tweet on Twitter. And basically, from my understanding, he was at a luncheon with the Angels, lives in Southern California. He's a Jersey guy too. And he was sitting with some former Angels, and these old players had great stories, which they do. All old players have great stories. So he was fascinated by this. And I think he's in the restaurant business too, and he was gonna open up a restaurant, or something was going on with a restaurant, but then COVID hit, so he couldn't do that. So he kind of followed his baseball dream or instincts and started it. And I think a lot's been accomplished quickly, but as you know, it's a tough market. Everything's a tough market these days, and hopefully, we continue to grow a little bit, and not just me, but there's like Rocco, who does a Q&A. We have a Q&A guy every week who does some amazing Q&As, in-depth stuff of guys like you wouldn't, all former players, and some of the stories he comes up with are just stunning, and it's all in their own words. So these guys tell, things you would never think, like Don Slaught. Who would think Don Slaught would be interesting? But the Don Slaught interview was phenomenal. And like I said, we do food stuff too, and we call it like it is with the game. And Louis Tiant, Louis Tiant is one of our, he comes on occasion. We've got a lot of former players and a lot of scouts and baseball people are reading the site because they know we tell it like it is, and it's got a really good baseball community behind it right now. So if you're a fan, you'll find something on there that would be interesting, and you'll find I write twice a week for them, so that's it's a pretty heavy duty thing because I'm writing longer stories, but I'm doing it simply because I'm at the stage. We're basically at home anyway, so I got time, and there's some stories I can tell any story I want to tell. I have editorial freedom. For example, real quickly, I know a coach down here, a baseball coach, and again, they're all baseball related, but he played for the king in his court. He played 7-8 years for them, and his story was amazing. That's Eddie Feiner, the famous fast pitch softball player. And that story, when I wrote that story, the reaction we got was, I can't tell you how many emails and stuff.
He's still alive, Kevin?
No, Eddie's dead.
Okay.
But
okay.
So many people reacted to that story because their dad took them to go see Eddie Feiner somewhere along the line, and things like that. And that's what we do. We do stuff like that, and it's fun to do. And as long as I got time to do it, I'll still do it. And I can even a little thing like there was a guy who started a new business in all this. It's called, it was originally called Wiffle Works. Now it's called Backyard Rule. But he was a baseball player and an arts major, so creative design or something. So he created a wiffle ball field that's portable, and with a home plate and basically he runs tournaments. He runs tournaments all around.
Right.
And so you never know what you're going to get here. You're not going to get the same old thing about so and so's hamstring bothered him. And even guys like the article I did recently with the analytics and stuff, people reach out to me, and like Alex Rodriguez sent me a note. Hey Rod, that's so when you're impressing one thing about A-Rod, love him or hate him, he does his homework, and he loves baseball. So we hear, like I said, I hear from a lot of baseball people, so I know we've tapped into something.
Who is the most? There were two that I've seen that were just by far the most electrifying players I've had. Then I'll let you wrap up. Who's the most electrifying player that you've seen? Is that a fair question?
I'm not good on these kind of questions sometimes.
Okay.
Because there's so many.
Well, who's one of them?
I would say you gotta be right. Gotta be, to me, Willie Mays was probably the most electrifying, wouldn't you say?
Oh, I've never seen him play.
See, I've seen him play. So
yeah.
Mickey Mantle in his heyday was electrifying. I mean,
okay.
He could drop a bunt down. He could hit it 500 feet.
Yeah.
And he had that energy about him where he was, he was just so charismatic. I think in today's game, I'll change the question a little bit. Mookie Betts to me is electrifying. And all the different things he can do. And you don't want to miss, and again, I'm taking into account fielding as well. Some guys will just do hitting, do the Bonds thing. And Bonds was a great fielder with the McGuire thing. A guy, I tell you, Rosarina, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes with his career. I don't think that was a fluke, that postseason that he had. When you're hitting all those balls out and doing all those things, a very interesting story too. Like you heard, but he basically got very stronger when he got COVID or he was quarantined, and just kind of did the Herschel Walker thing, did push-ups and sit-ups, and became a beast. So yeah, baseball needs to do what I told Dave and myself and a couple of other writers told David Stern way back when. Hey, David, you got a great product here in the NBA, but why don't you start highlighting guys like Magic and Bird instead of Celtics and Lakers? People want to know about the individuals, and baseball needs to do that more too, with some of the players that they have today. And it's because I think you can almost pick an electric, and that's a good question, because baseball needs more electrifying players. They don't need more what I call showcase players that come out to a showcase and hit home runs, and do the same groove swing. They need more electrifying players. To some degree, I find Aaron Judge that type of player, because he can play defense. He can make great catches. He can make great throws. He's an athlete, football player. smart guy, and he's a great hitter. He hits the ball all fields. So yeah, there's a lot of players who have that potential, and baseball needs to really promote those guys.
I saw Bonds when he was in the middle of that steroid thing, you know, and that was crazy. I mean, I just couldn't take my eyes off him because he was just so much better. You could just the confident. You could just like, what the heck's that? Baseball, you don't get that usually, you know. But
No, and he if he got one pitch, he would hit it out. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
I covered him. Like I said, I covered, and very interesting. And some of that, it's not just all steroids. Obviously,
right.
he was talented, but one of the things that he once told me, I asked him about that. I said, "How do you?" And he said a very interesting thing, which I'm amazed that more hitters don't do. He told me, because he's a lefty hitter, and he told me that he uses his left hand to punch. He punches. That's his swing. He punches, and the bat follows through, and that's what he does, and that's why the ball, And he
Wow.
was always a great hitter. He was a great hitter with the Pirates way back when, and
Right.
Barry, and but it's very interesting. He keeps his hand close to his body and punches, and But again, getting back to everything else we talked about, but maybe because he could zone in so well on everything. I mean, and again, he's a classic example of getting pissed off because he saw all the attention go to McGuire and the home run guy Sosa, when he knew could be twice the player he was as they could be, and he clearly put himself on a program to get to be that player.
Well, it's good to kind of interesting to hear your take on him, Kevin, because you hear different stories about him, and they're all not too positive, you know. So it's interesting to see your side of him. That he seemed like a nice guy because you hear things about him that
Well,
aren't that great, you know.
yeah, don't get me wrong. And actually, like I said, next time if we do this again, I'll tell you a great story about how to get Barry Bonds' attention.
Okay, okay. I met Mickey once, and I was shocked how, and then I'm going to let you go. I promise. I was shocked how I'm 5'10" exactly,
Yeah,
and he was exactly the same height. He was thick. Even
yeah.
he was about 56 at the time, and he looked like he could still play. And he wasn't that big, those guys back then, you know?
No, they had a more compact swing, and you don't have. That's the beauty of baseball. You don't have to be huge. I mean, and even in the postseason this year, we saw some guys at 5'10" doing some things, and that to me that was the most amazing thing about meeting Yogi Berra face to face for the first time. He's just a little old guy, and obviously he's older, but at the time, but he wasn't. He was tiny. He was almost tiny, but he had long arms. He had the ability to hit anything, and he was a great athlete. And that's the thing. Even Reggie, you see Reggie Jackson nowadays, and Reggie's small almost, certainly compared to today's players. And some of that is shrinkage in time. I know myself, as you get older, you lose, some stuff. But
Oh, Joe DiMaggio seemed to lose a lot of height later on, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and that's the beauty of baseball. You can be even Mike Trout. When I see Mike Trout talk about electrifying players, so there's one. Mike's not a big guy, and he's probably right in that 5'10" range. So it's pretty.
Okay, right, right. Do you speak to all these guys too, Kevin? Just curious. Like, can you pick up the phone and call?
On a daily basis, I would speak to him all the time.
Can you call Michael Jordan tomorrow?
I don't have his number, but if I seen him,
Okay.
if Magic saw me tomorrow, he'd give me a big hug.
Cool. Yeah, yeah.
And Jordan too, he'd remember it because, like I said, I'll leave you with this. I was in, the final dance, Last Dance. If the last 5 minutes of Last Dance, there was a segment on Rodman, and I got along good with Rodman, and Rodman was skipping. He was doing that wrestling stuff then, so he would skip out on practice.
That's right. That's right.
But I always got along great with Rodman because he was a good quote, and I like guys who are good quote, not afraid to talk. That's what I loved about Bird. He was a great quote. Say anything. Be honest guy. Cedric Maxwell, Robert Parrish, all those guys. Magic was a great quote. Every one of them. But so I staked out Rodman, so I knew where he was going to come out the back door, where the other 100 writers didn't have a clue. So after they won that last championship, I asked Rodman, and again, I was on deadline. You got to understand, it's a late game. I only have like a half hour to write a story, and I'm going to do a column on this team being the greatest team ever. So I get to Rodman and other guys are maybe in the press conference room waiting for players to be brought to them, but I went and got Rodman, and I asked him. I said, and this is what's still on, and it's proved the test of time. It's still on. They didn't use many questions from the media one-on-one in that whole segment thing, that whole series. But this one they let stand, and I'm standing there walking with Rodman, and I say, Dennis, is this the greatest team of all time? And he's, simple, again, getting back to simple questions. And he looked at me like only Rodman could. And he said, basically, damn right it is. If you can't realize that, you must be, I don't know what kind of drugs you're doing. And because Rodman, back then, of course, there were, he just was a colorful guy. It became a great quote, and then and that's still in the Last Dance. So
I'll have to check it out now.
Yeah. So talking to those guys, like Piazza, I could call Piazza if I wanted to later and talk about whatever. And even in March, I called Piazza, and it was a very underrated story. It should have got more play, but I talked to Piazza early in March. If you remember, Piazza got honored by the Mets and Jeff Wilpon this year. They made a road for him. They named a street after him down there. So he stayed in the United States. He didn't go back to Italy. He lives in Italy.
Mike Piazza lives in Italy?
Yeah, and his family was able to get over around Valentine's Day, and Italy was in the eye of the storm with COVID back then, if you remember. And Piazza had some very enlightening comments way back then to me, basically saying what we were kind of up against, because he's seen it in Italy. And, a lot of it with Italy, there was a lot of, they were doing a lot of business with China. So there was a lot of back and forth with China. And so Mike knew early on how dangerous this was. And, we talked about that, and he had some advice for us. But those are the kind of those are the kind of stories I do sometimes, and again, I just called him out of the blue, and I think he's back in Italy now. I think I saw something recently, but it's when the guys. Here's the whole key, right? When they may not like me because I may have been critical of them, but they respected me because I was honest, and that's the whole key. And I've heard that from a million guys, Last NBA story, but it puts everything in perspective. Latrell Sprewell, we all know about Latrell Sprewell, right? Tough guy.
He had some issues, right? In the 80s, something happened.
Yeah, choked his coach.
Yep, right.
Yeah, but he was a Knick for a while, and I found him to be fairly easy to deal with because you just be straight up with him. So one day I talked to his agent, and his agent ripped the Knicks manager for whatever reason. I forget what it was. But the agent was so critical that the Knicks fined Latrell Sprewell something like $35,000, which was big money back then. And so the next day we had to go in and meet with Latrell in the locker room, and that having just had $35,000 pulled out of his pocket because of a story I wrote, it could have went south. But part of being a good reporter is you got to show up the next day no matter what you write. And that's what you see a lot of now. Doesn't happen. You have people pontificating and they never come to the clubhouse. And now, of course, you can't come to the clubhouse. But you got to show up the next day. So I came in, and the other writers, and they were a good bunch of writers on the Knick beat back then. They were asking, hey, about this fine. And Latrell didn't know all the details, but I remember one thing he said. He said, I paid the fine. If Kevin wrote it, I know it's true. So that was a nice thing to say, So that's the
respect. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Cool. Well, Kevin, thanks for your time. I really appreciate you coming out. I'm going to let you go to the beach, or I think you're near there, right? Or you're by the ocean.
A couple blocks away, but we got a little. That's why I had some time this morning. We got a little bit of a tropical storm rolling across, so it's a little windy and rainy.
Is this going to be the final destination, or are you going to come back to New Jersey one day?
To visit.
Okay. Okay.
I'll come back and get a slice, or go down the shore, or see the grandkids, and
Right.
hey, when the governor allows us to. I mean, it seems like it's hard to get around there right now, but and of course, I grew up, like I told you, I grew up in Kennewick, New Jersey, and we used to have some great. Jimmy Buff's was a great hot dog up there back then.
Okay. Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, so
Well, maybe in the spring, if you come on again, we'll be in a different universe by then, in a positive side, right? Yes.
Okay, Ray, enjoyed it. Thanks for the time.
Kevin Kernan, thank you. This is Ray K. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of NEWHD NYC. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform.